we may be seeing the ultimate poll this week. There's a lot of emphasis made on polls, and we love to read them. We love to hear about them, and they're all over the board. Prior to Joe Biden dropping out last week, Donald Trump had led in most all of the national polls. With Kamala Harris's honeymoon this past week, not so good. It's been more of a neck and neck, a close call within the margin of error. Some of the states that Trump had been leading in, he is now slightly trailing, again, if you believe the polls. In some cases, his lead of 4, 5, 6 points has been cut to 1 or 2 points, again, within the margin of error. Kamala Harris was in Atlanta, Georgia last night at a campaign rally. She was at the Georgia State Convocation Center, which has a listed capacity of 8,000 people for concerts and other events. Her campaign is reporting that there were 10,000 people who showed up to see the vice president last night. Now, this is a big contrast compared to the crowds or the lack of crowds who had been showing up for Joe Biden. Joe Biden had been very careful in how he set up rallies because they didn't want a room that was too big, a room that they knew they could not fill up. Evidently, Kamala Harris, that renewed enthusiasm that we've been hearing Democrats talk about, is working in Atlanta. But guess who's going to be there this weekend? Guess who has booked the same venue that Kamala Harris was in last night? Donald Trump and his running mate JD Vance will be at the Georgia State Convocation Center this weekend as well. I suspect that not only will he fill the center up, but once again, like we saw in Charlotte, North Carolina, just last week, there'll be people standing out in the parking lot looking at the video monitors as well. Donald Trump purposely scheduled this rally at the same venue so that he could show the Democrats and show Kamala Harris that he too could fill the venue up. Biden's immediate backing of Harris, of course, last week is said to have ignited a surge of support behind Kamala Harris that initially we weren't sure was going to be there. There was a lot of people not quite sure how she was going to be received. If the past 10 days or so now is any indication, the Democrats are now rallying around Kamala, helping her raise money, helping her recruit volunteers, and in this case, probably the biggest gathering of Democrats in Atlanta last night that we've seen in quite some time. Joe Biden certainly could not draw this type of crowd. The stop by the vice president, of course, is a key test for Democrats in a state that they need, in Georgia. Georgia used to be a solid red, reliable Republican state. Not so much in recent years. They have 2 Democrat U.S. senators. Joe Biden, if you believe the votes, barely squeaked by with a victory. Donald Trump wants to change that, as do all Republicans. Georgia appears to be competitive for Trump this year. In some of the recent polls, Trump was leading Joe Biden. With Kamala Harris, it's more of a close race. It's within the margin of error again. Trump's edge in several other key battleground states, like Wisconsin, like Michigan, like Pennsylvania, again tightening up after Kamala Harris was named the presumptive nominee. We're going to see just how much that changes. What do you think, though? You think Trump will fill up the Georgia Convocation Center, and there'll be people standing out in the parking lot like they were in Charlotte, North Carolina last week again? These are very similar size venues. The Bojangles Arena in Charlotte had a capacity of 8,600. that was set up for sports events. Supposedly, you could get another 2,000 to 3,000 on the floor, which Donald Trump was able to do last week in Charlotte. Plus, they turned people away. There was a large crowd out in the parking lot watching some video monitors. The Harris campaign ahead of last night's event highlighted the large ground game that they have in Georgia, and they believe that gives them the competitive advantage over Trump. Battleground State Director Dan Kenningham noted that the campaign has 24 coordinated offices in Georgia, which he says is far ahead of the Trump campaign, which opened its first office in late June. Connigan said this battleground advantage will almost certainly be decisive in a race likely to be decided by just tens of thousands of votes in Georgia. The vice president, ahead of last night's rally, was set to meet with local abortion rights activists in a sign of how she plans to showcase the issue as a central part of her campaign. But anyone who is on the fence or anyone who is questioning where Kamala Harris stands, the fact that she is meeting with abortion rights activists, and this is not the first time, in some of the other cities where she's been traveling these past few weeks, she's made a point to meet with some of these extreme groups. Now, in some of her campaign ads, she's trying to paint a different Kamala Harris. She's trying to convince us that she has changed. But yet, she makes a point to meet with the abortion rights groups and some of the other extreme groups before these campaign rallies. Kamala Harris has not changed. Kamala Harris, as a caller a minute ago said, is a chameleon. She wants us to think that she has changed, but deep down, she still has those extreme views. Democrats announced yesterday that Vice President Kamala Harris was the only candidate to earn enough delegates to qualify for the virtual roll call that will start taking place tomorrow and will end on Monday, which pretty much guarantees that she will be the Democrat nominee. If there was any question before now that there could be a potential floor fight when they get to Chicago, that's over. Kamala Harris is going to be the Democrat nominee. Also, a Secret Service sniper warns that there could be additional attacks between now and November as the agency's failures have become publicized as a result of the failure to protect Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania on July the 13th. Also, the Biden-Harris administration proposed a new rule that will allow illegal immigrants to access taxpayer-funded college prep courses that were meant for low-income American citizens. We're going to dive into all of this, plus your phone calls and your comments on the MyPillow text line, 1-800-655-6453, 800-655-6453. Joey Hudson in for Mike today. Glad to have you join me. The Democrats announced yesterday Kamala Harris is the only candidate that they'll be considering as they start their virtual roll call tomorrow. Now, you may recall that this was set up to ensure that they met some of the deadlines that some states have for having candidates' names to be on the ballot in November. This virtual roll call had been established for Joe Biden. Now that Kamala Harris, though, is the presumptive nominee, of course, Kamala Harris will be receiving these votes over the next few days. We may be having what is the ultimate poll, though, as Kamala Harris was in Atlanta last night. She had a pretty large crowd, probably the largest crowd we've seen at a Democrat function in recent history. Donald Trump easily has thousands and thousands of people show up. Just last week in Charlotte, North Carolina at the Bojangles Arena, they list their capacity at 8,600. People lined up, waited in line for hours to get in to see Donald Trump, and that's how these rallies typically are for Trump. We haven't seen that on the Democrat side of things. We haven't seen that, especially for Joe Biden. They have trouble filling a room unless it's a bunch of leftist Hollywood type elites who are there writing big checks. We've seen Joe Biden have success at that. Obviously, Kamala Harris this past week has had great success at raising money, if in fact $200 million is the correct number. They claim they've raised $200 million this past week after Kamala Harris became the presumptive Democrat nominee. So Democrats say that the fact that Kamala Harris had this huge crowd show up in Atlanta last night, that this is another sign of the energy and the excitement that's returning to the Democrat Party now that Joe Biden has stepped aside and Kamala Harris is at the front of the ticket. Vice President wrote on a social media post on her way to Atlanta yesterday, "Freedom is on the ballot this November. That's why I'll be in Atlanta tonight with the Stallion to talk about the stakes of this election." Now, what you need to know is rapper Megan Thee Stallion performed at the rally prior to the vice president coming on to speak. The question is, did people go to see Kamala Harris, or were they there to see this rapper? Now, I have to admit, I'm not much of a fan of rap, so I don't know who Megan Thee Stallion is, but evidently he's a popular guy. It's a she? Megan Thee Stallion. Okay, see, that's how much I know about rap. Eric Hansen saying I thought I saw a picture of a guy, though, at the podium. I guess that was someone else. Oh, okay. All right. So, Megan Thee Stallion, she Stallion, performed at the rally. So, who were they there to see? Was it this rapper, or was it Kamala Harris? That's a question for you. 1-800-655-MIKE, 1-800-655-6453. Good news, though, for the Trump campaign. You remember the name Nate Silver? Nate Silver is an election analyst. He's considered a statistical guru. He has this model that he supposedly can scientifically predict the winners of presidential races. He's been right more than he's been wrong. Even after Democrats dramatically changed the top of their ticket this past week and got a bit of a boost, I mean, we have to give that to them. There seems to be some renewed energy and excitement on the Democrat side of things. I've seen some explain that by saying that with Joe Biden, they knew what they had, and they knew there was no hope. There was no energy. Joe Biden had a hard time getting a group excited about anything. I think the excitement over Kamala is just the fact that they got rid of Joe Biden. Nate Silver, though, says, and this is based on his forecast model, he gives Trump a 61.3% chance of winning the Electoral College, while he gives Kamala Harris just a 38.1%. Now, this is the Electoral College. He still predicts that Kamala Harris will win the popular vote by a slight margin, but he believes that Donald Trump will easily win the Electoral College. So we potentially could have another 2016 here, just like Trump did with Hillary Clinton. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with Donald Trump winning the Electoral College, but maybe losing the popular vote to Kamala Harris. I wish he would win the popular vote so that we could take that argument away from him. But the important thing is who wins the Electoral College, because that's who's going to get to sit behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office for the next 4 years. And that's the important thing. And Nate Silver says that that's Donald Trump. Silver previously had Trump beating Joe Biden with a 65.7% chance of victory. So that has come down slightly, just about 4 points, with Kamala Harris being at the top of the ticket. But again, that's a small change to get a big win here. In his most recent assessment, Silver included a slew of polling averages that gave Trump slight advantages nationally and in most of the battleground states, not in Wisconsin, he says, but some of the other battleground states, even Georgia. Silver's analysis showed that Harris rapidly gained ground on Trump in most of the national polls, which we've seen. We've seen those results. His model also gave Harris a 53.5% chance of winning the popular vote, with Trump's at 46.5%. The way he does this, he bases it on 40,000 simulations that he runs through his model. So just a lot of data. Even last month, he had Biden slightly edging out Donald Trump with the popular vote. Now, when I say slight, I mean slight, 1/10 of a percentage point, 47.2% to Trump's 47.1%. But he still had Donald Trump easily winning the Electoral College. Now, you have to remember, the last Republican to win both the Electoral College and the popular vote was George W. Bush back in 2004. So again, if Trump doesn't win the popular vote, I wish he would. I just want him in the Oval Office. Do you care? Does it bother you that Trump might not win the popular vote but will still win the electoral vote and move into the Oval Office once again? 800-655-6453, 800-655-MIKE. Your calls are welcome, as are your comments on the MyPillow text line. I'm Joey Hudson, in for Mike.